Does crime function as the stealth abolition of private property and other rights guaranteed to us inside the Constitution? It sure seems like it, as crime is now the favorite tool of the elite to implement anarcho-tyranny. Anarchy for friends of the regime and tyranny for perceived enemies of it. The Substack author I like to follow argues convincingly, quote, disparate impact is the stealth abolition of private property. Disparate impact renders all goods de facto non-excludable. Anything you offer to customers must also be accessible to vandals and parasites, which means that all goods become a commons, subject to the tragedy thereof, end quote. Now here's a clip of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley on the House floor, which first sparked the observation I just read for you.
Mr. Speaker, Walgreens is planning to close yet another pharmacy in the Massachusetts 7th, this time on Warren Street in Roxbury, a community that is 85% Black and Latino. This closure is a part of a larger trend of abandoning low-income communities like the previous closures in Mattapan and Hyde Park, both in the Massachusetts 7th. When a Walgreens leaves a neighborhood, they disrupt the entire community, and they take with them baby formula, diapers, asthma inhalers, life-saving medications, and of course, jobs. These closures are not arbitrary, and they are not innocent. They are life-threatening acts of racial and economic discrimination. That is why I joined with Senator Markey and Warren to demand answers from Walgreens CEO. Why was there no community input, no adequate notice to customers, and no transition resources to prevent gaps in health care? Shame on you, Walgreens. Having a website with talking points about health equity and underserved communities is not enough. Walgreens is a multi-billion-dollar corporation that needs to put their money where their mouth is and stop divesting from Black and brown communities.
So basically the left decriminalizes theft, theft increases, stores start to shut down, those closures leave food deserts in certain largely minority areas, meaning that other residents have to travel farther in order to obtain basic goods. But instead of punishing the thieves inside those communities who are doing all the stealing, because yes, that's who's doing the stealing, it's not MAGA white people coming from outside the community to do it, Democrat politicians instead want to blame the stores themselves and somehow force them to what? Stay open at a loss? And at the risk of their employees' physical safety because something about racism and disparate impact? And come to think of it, the poor residents who are most affected by these store closures literally vote for the crime through Democrat politicians. They typically are not very friendly to cops, so you kind of get what you vote for in these specific instances. But anyway, the larger message here from the government, at least, like what you heard from Pressley, is that your private property is not your own, Walgreens. The government can dictate to you about it, and thieves can steal it from you with impunity. You are not your own person. Your belongings belong to the state. I think that's why the other squad member, Ilhan Omar, when she isn't praising Somalia and Islam, is leading other like-minded politicians and sending a letter to Secretary of State Antony Blinken about the president of El Salvador. Why? Because he proves that national decline in crime are choices, not inevitabilities like lefties would like Americans to believe as they pick at the corpse of our once great nation like vultures for whatever money and power they can squeeze out of its remains. She wants the State Department to reevaluate its ties to the nation, which I don't know what exactly she means by that. Does she want them to get the old band back together with the CIA and all the rest and start plotting coups and regime changes in South America like it's the 80s all over again? Again, all because the president said, you know what would be a good idea? Locking up all gang members, humiliating them behind bars in their underwear for all the world to see, and smashing up all their grave sites and other public imagery that people used to honor so they don't get shot in the middle of the night by these gang members. And guess what? It worked. Homicides are down 70% last year, and El Salvador went from being one of the most crime-ridden countries on the earth to now having crime rates comparable to some European countries. At least the country is taking Ilhan Omar's indignant letter in stride, as President Nayib Bukele tweeted back to the Congresswoman, "We are honored to receive your attacks just days before our election. I would be very worried if we had your support. Thank you." Now, if that wasn't great enough, he then began calling for America to have free and fair elections, since we obviously don't, and we have people like Ilhan trying to interfere in his nation's election. But again, remember that this proves that decline is a choice. Representative Ayanna Pressley from earlier could choose to follow in Bukele's footsteps if she really cared about the people affected by the closures of Walgreens. Instead, she demands more poverty, more despair, and more government control.